On today's episode of The Front Row, we are downtown in the Lubbock Cultural District in the offices of the Lubbock Symphony Orchestra, and our special guest is Maestro David Cho, conductor of the Lubbock Symphony Orchestra. David, welcome back to The Front Row. Thank you for being our guest today.
Thank you, Clint.
So, coming up Thursday night, tomorrow night, is a concert by the Lubbock Symphony Orchestra, and it revolves around Beethoven. So how did you come up with that idea, and what are you going to play?
Beethoven has become synonymous to symphonic heroism, and people love Beethoven's music. I've played and watched, try to emulate Peanuts, and of course we hear the music of Beethoven there all the time. And growing up, being a pianist, I couldn't run away from the music of Beethoven.
Right.
He was a great pianist who wrote 32 sonatas, 5 piano concertos. And eventually, as I veered into the dark world of conducting, got to know, of course, his 9 symphonies. In addition, of course, the choral fantasy, which is being featured, and several of the historical facts about his only opera, Fidelio. So the first half will feature the Lubbock Chorale, and the symphony will begin with, of course, Star Spangled Banner by Beethoven. Just kidding.
Right.
And the Coriolanus Overture, followed by the Prisoner's Chorus from his only opera, Fidelio, and then the choral fantasy, all in one piece without any breaks. So attacca. So there will be no applause. All 3 pieces being performed in one piece.
Okay.
Second half will be the 4th symphony, which has this contrasting character between his 3rd and the 5th symphonies. It's known as having more of a genial tone, and not often do you hear the symphony, but we have a great bassoonist, Vince Ocampo, who has this very brief solo but exciting solo in the final movement. So that's the program for Thursday night, tomorrow night.
And a great program it is. I mean, it's really fantastic music from the first note all the way to the end. It's really great. Let's unpack it just a little bit. So the Coriolanus Overture, is one of the standalone pieces by Beethoven. How did you come to pick that one?
Beethoven's middle period has some notable themes. For example, the tragedy and the sacrifice, and finally arriving in this heroism and triumph. So we wanted to begin with this tone of tragedy. I think Shakespeare wrote this Coriolanus 200 years before Beethoven's composition of Coriolanus Overture. And we wanted to move from the tragic tone to the hopeful, sort of a foreshadowing of triumph, sung by the Prisoner's Chorus. We can talk about the plot a little bit later. And then finally capping off the first half, ending with the bright tone, triumphant choral fantasy, which was prequel to the 9th Symphony, Ode to Joy. So they share a very similar tone and message.
Right. Well, you've got such a great program, beginning with the Coriolanus Overture, then the Prisoner's Chorus from the opera Fidelio. There's a lot to unpack about this. This is his only opera, and it had various incarnations. It wasn't always Fidelio. It started out as Leonora, and then there's some overtures for that. It's all very confusing. Where does the Prisoner's Chorus fit in the scope of things?
Well, to start things off, yes. The only opera Beethoven wrote went through several transformations. He took one librettist's lyrics or text and wrote 3-act opera in the early 1800s. And it took about 9 years or so to whittle it down to 2 acts, switched librettist, and whittle it down even more, adding a couple of aspects. And one of the aspects, notable aspect moment in the end of the first act, I believe, is the prisoner's chorus, and it foreshadows the prisoner, the protagonists, who has been being captured and imprisoned, and he sees this vision of his wife disguised as a man named Fidelio to arrive as an angel to help him escape. So it's a very crucial moment in the opera. The opera had 4 different overtures. Leonore number 1, number 2, number 3, and finally the Fidelio overture.
Right.
We actually don't hear it often enough in the symphonic setting, but in the opera,
Right.
you will hear the Fidelio overture.
Right.
Sometimes during the second act, between the scenes, you will hear one of the Leonore overtures, but that's something to be discussed at a different time.
Right.
In the symphonic world, however, we know the third Leonore overture the best.
Right.
Number 1 and 2 are lesser known, although played once in a blue moon. So the only opera by Beethoven called Fidelio, originally called Leonore, a triumph of marital love. I would say it in German, but I don't want to botch my German. So it took 9 years for 3-act opera to whittle down to 2, and whittle down to shorter 2 acts, adding the prisoner's chorus and a couple other notable moments in the opera. So
Right.
2-act opera finally. It was premiered in 1805, and the final version arrived in 1814. So 9 years. Yeah, if I do that math correctly. Yeah.
All right. And it's become known as like the quintessential German opera. It's
Of course.
Fidelio.
Yes.
Yeah, right.
It's, again, from the middle period in Beethoven's compositional output. It's about personal sacrifice, heroism, and triumph over whatever that was happening politically and between the government and the citizens.
Right.
Yeah, like an underlying tone of political message.
Right. And then there's the choral fantasy, a work for piano, orchestra, and within the orchestra, a little string quartet, and then chorus as well. It's a great piece. It's a
Yes.
wonderful piece.
It sure is. And it also 6 vocalists, soloists. So in a way, it employs more musicians and singers than the Ninth Symphony. As we know, the Ninth Symphony has trombones, the Janissary percussionists, piccolo, contrabassoon, and 4 soloists. But in the choral fantasy, we have 6 vocal soloists, a pianist.
Right.
Yeah.
And the piano part is big. It's a big play.
It sure is. And for the first 15 minutes or so of the piece, it's a piano cadenza or a solo, or piano solo accompanied by parts of the orchestra. And then followed by, as you mentioned, 4 string soloists, the front stand soloists from the Lubbock Symphony, and eventually followed by the 6 vocalists, and then reiterated by the chorus.
All right.
Yeah.
And it's a very exciting ending. Everybody playing. It's great.
It is. It's very, very...
Everybody will be happy at intermission.
I think that follows that triumph message that Beethoven's middle period exuded.
Right. And then you finish the concert in the second half with the B-flat major symphony by Beethoven, the 4th symphony. And you alluded to it just a while ago. There is this wonderful passage in the end for both clarinet and bassoon. They get to play this wonderful little passage. And if you know the symphony, everybody waits for it. So it's a lot of fun. A lot of fun to listen to.
Yes. And Beethoven, at the time of the composition, was enjoying some time off at the palace of Prince, am I saying it right? Lukowitzki?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And surroundings were more relaxed, and I believe that had to do with more of a pleasant tone in this symphony. As you know, the third symphony was uproar, and the fifth symphony, how can a symphony be connected all by this form motive? So in between the two weightier symphonies happened this fourth symphony, which is more genial and very upbeat. The second movement, from what I read, was sort of a love song to his Beethoven's immortal beloved. Apparently her name was Teresa. So many performances I hear the beginning, the second violins, the famous motive, dum, bum, 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 bum. But this was more of a love song, so it has to reflect the heartbeat of Beethoven also, and her name was Teresa, so it was Teres, 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 more like a nervous heartbeat for his immortal beloved. So we're going to take that approach instead of the is it Teutonic? Bam, bam, bam. Instead of that, we'll have dum, dee dee, dee dee.
Oh, that'll be so much better. Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
Yeah. Right. So it's a love song, and of course the third movement is a trio, a scherzo trio, and the fourth movement, as you mentioned, it features very brief solos from bassoon and clarinet.
Right. Yeah. And it's a lot of fun. Everybody will leave with a smile on their face.
Yes.
It's good.
Yeah.
What a wonderful concert. Great. So the concert is tomorrow night in the Helen DeWitt Jones Theater in the Buddy Holly Hall. What can people do if they want to come to the concert?
Please go to the Lubbock Symphony website, lubbocksymphony.org. There's a link for you to arrive at eTix for you to purchase tickets. We have student tickets available for $10 starting now. So as soon as possible, not 1 hour before the show. We've been selling student tickets 1 week before the show.
Right.
So you can come to the hall and purchase, or call us at 762-1688. So again, for normal tickets, go online. For student tickets, call us or show up at the hall.
Great, sounds wonderful. David Cho is the conductor and music director of the Lubbock Symphony Orchestra, performing tomorrow night, music by Beethoven, in the Buddy Holly Hall. David, thank you so much for your time today, being our guest on the front row.
It's my absolute pleasure. Thank you, Clint.